we weren't here last week, so we've got some catching up to do. Um, First off, remember, I want to comment on some stocks, but remember, this is not a invitation to buy or sell any securities at all. But it's just we want to talk about what we do, the things we look at, and kind of insights on what's happening in our lives and how we manage our trust assets. I talked to you last week about companies that evolved during crisis. Obviously now is a really big crisis. And one of those companies I talked about was Kodak. And we talked about how Kodak had been a film company, and then they had this new idea where they were going to bring on some the ability to package medical goods, and their stock just went crazy. And what happened was on the 28th, their stock was trading about $6 to $10. They'd been bankrupt. It was trading as low as $4 in the early part of the year. And then all of a sudden it shot up on the 29th. Its trading range was $17.50 all the way up to $60. And I'd made a comment that was something we'd be looking at, which we did. And we opted, we didn't like what we saw. There was a couple things going on. I won't go into that. We did not create a position in Kodak. It was interesting to see that a company might actually be able to evolve themselves and turn into something like that. And today, yesterday, their stock was trading between $9.07 and $9.20. So there were a lot of people that went into it using a couple of personal apps, and they started going into it as it climbed through 38, 40, 45, 50. It hit 60, and it's since come back down to reality. And there's a couple things going on, but those are the kind of things you want to look at. You see an opportunity before you jump on it. We always want to take a really good look at why that opportunity appears to be there. A couple of things have happened. We talked 2 weeks ago about the FOMC. September 15th is their next big date, and that's when they'll announce forecasts for economy for the rest of the year. We're starting to see a couple things come in that are a little bit concerning. Kansas City, Missouri has announced they're extending their emergency period to January 16th, which means masks, 50% capacity to bars and restaurants, things like that. And so it'll be kind of interesting to see how everybody else follows, because that's a pretty, I'm not going to use the word draconian, I want to, but that's a pretty long spread to say we're going to go on to January 16th. American Airlines has extended their no refund policy to December 31st. That's also a pretty big spread for an airline to step up and do that. So we're seeing some things that tell us that there's not a lot of confidence that this is going to be over anytime soon. So as far as insight, what we're looking at, our next hurdles are, we have school starting between probably today and then September the 8th. And then the next 14 to 21 days after that are going to be a little bit telling. On September 15th, we have the FOMC meeting. That's going to be very telling. We know who the Democrat nominee for vice president is. The market likes when it knows those things, so we're seeing some stability. That's good. And then, of course, the election in November, that's important. So we've got some big hurdles coming up, and they're not so much obstacles as they are maybe benchmarks to pay attention to and where we're going. So Mallory, let's go on and go to our Dow Jones chart. And there's actually some good news on this. You can see that I've always said I'll take 40 points up one day, every day, and I'd be happy. The hundreds of points make me a little bit nervous. So over on the far right-hand side, you can see, let me get this over here. You can see that we're starting to see an uptick both on the daily run and then the 7-day average and then the 14-day average. 14-day average is gray. So you can see all of those starting to rise up a little bit. And if you go back to the far left, then you can see where our numbers were in early February. We're not fully recovered from the COVID crisis, but we're getting close. So we talked early on different types of recoveries we could see, and there's a V, there's a W, and here there's a U, and we have an L, and then we had the Nike swoosh. And it kind of looks like that Nike swoosh is winning right now. So I've said for 3 or 4 weeks that it really depends on what happens going forward, and what's happening is we're seeing it creep up, and that's a good thing. So that's good news. The interesting part is, as I talked about 2 weeks ago, the FOMC said as COVID goes, so will the economy. Well, generally, we've always said that the stock market kind of leads things. It's a little bit ahead of it. So here you would be forecasting that COVID's maybe going to go away. We're going to find some solutions. It's not a conflicting story based on what we're seeing in reality, but it's interesting to watch, and it's something we really need to be paying attention to. The other part of good news, Mallory, the next slide is our unemployment slide, I think. And, oops, sorry, there we go. And you can see that the filings for unemployment is starting to creep down. That's not totally unexpected. I used an example recently. I know someone whose take-home pay working a full-time job in the IT industry, his take-home pay is $645 a week. Well, the $600 the government was giving out wasn't that much less. And it's pretty tough to argue that if you have someone who doesn't have to get up in the morning and drive to work and things like that. Well, that's gone. So you're going to see that go down a little bit. But the red line is the moving average, and that's also declining a little bit. So that's more of our trend, and we're seeing that come down. The interesting part here is obviously going to be what happens. Travel and leisure are going to be almost a completely separate issue. When November hits, anything north of, Oklahoma, Mississippi, anything like that, the outdoor dining is going to go away. And so that may affect that, it will affect that in some way. And that may bring some of those unemployment numbers back up. But for now, we're seeing the numbers slide down. That's awesome. We're seeing our moving average slide down. That's also great. It's not taking a big dive, but it's nice to see it dropping a little bit. So now we're going to talk about, if we could, for just a second, let's go to the markets for the week, Mallory. And that's the, let's stay right here. So this is actually also good news. This is closed last night, world markets. And over on the far right-hand side, you see what now looks like it's a solid green bar, whereas in the past, it's been more like a Christmas tree, a little green, a little red. This is based on where the markets were last week. So versus last week, all world markets are up, and that's a very positive indicator. What you see, the red lines under the July 20th, July 30th of 2020, those red numbers, those losses are actually versus beginning of the year. So most of them are down versus the beginning of the year, but they're not down that much. What's important to me is the green bar on the right shows that virtually all the major indices worldwide have turned positive versus the previous week. So again, that's a trend. I'm big on watching trends and see what's happening, and that's a good sign. Now, can they keep that going, and can we last through the United States Labor Day coming up, and can we start seeing that in toward the middle of September? That'll be really important. The other thing here that I continually point out that I think is very positive, it's taken a little bit turn for me, but the NASDAQ, which is our basically high technology indice, is up 18%, which is great. But then you see on the top two, Japan and Germany, their numbers are starting to improve pretty rapidly as well. Now, those are major economies, and Japan is one of our biggest comparisons. So you have the Nikkei down only 1.7%. That's a very solid performance. Germany down 1.9. That's also a very solid performance. And see, the rest of them are really lagging behind. But we're seeing some strength in overseas markets, and so that's where we would stay. We would stay away from emerging markets still, but we see some decent, solid international stocks that we might be starting to look at. And then Mallory, the other chart, please, which shows us, this is our week, the Dow Jones Industrial Average starting last Friday to the close last night, NASDAQ and the S&P 500, all positive stuff, things that we like to see. So there's some good and the bad side. This is more of a tempered opinion. I like the things I'm seeing here. I'm very, very much aware. We're very, very much aware of the things coming in the future and what to watch for. COVID cases continue to rise. We're at 100 and I think it's 156 to 160,000 deaths just in the United States alone. That's a significant number. And even though it is a small percentage, that's a lot. So the numbers keep rising. We still have a lot of hospitals overdone, and it's going to be really important on where we go forward with that. Can we find a vaccine? Who's going to come up with it? And how quickly will it get distributed? The consensus still remains that it will be late this year or early next year before we have that. And then so that means it'll be that time period before we can relax a little bit and call this good and it's over with. The FOMC is still looking at through 2021, our growth is going to be relatively stagnant. this is a time period where sometimes buy and sell is a great idea, but you've got to be careful what you're buying and what you're selling. It's hard to speculate in some things because the movement is going to be stagnant, but there will be pockets of the economy that really have great times. Those that adapt, like we talked about, those whose needs increase, consumer goods, always popular. And then, eventually we're going to start looking at travel and leisure picking up a little bit because there's a lot of pent up demand. So there's a lot going on. And when we try and talk about insights, these are the things that we take a look at that we're trying to keep under consideration. That's really it for this week. We'll be back again next week. The next really big swing that we're looking at again is September 15th at the FOMC. And the one thing we want to do is make sure we want to really express appreciation for you joining us. But in addition to that, if you've got friends that you think would do it, it's free. Come sit with us for 15 minutes on Friday morning. We'd enjoy that. We can send them the link, give us a call. I want to express my appreciation to Mallory, who's always behind me here, and I never get these reports to her until after the close of the market on Thursday. And sometimes I don't get them to her until after 4:30 or so, and she's bright and early, always ready to go. So Mallory Vaughn's a producer, and she just does an awesome job. Again, we really appreciate you joining us. If you have any friends that you want to turn this on to, let us know. It's also on Facebook. Mallory will have that up on Facebook in about 30 minutes, a recording, and you can send a link to that and tell your friends to go watch it. I'm always looking for things I want to address, questions. I won't do individual stocks, but if you have questions about the impact on things in the economy, please send me an email, mmccauley@firstoptionbank.com or mvaughan, MVAUGHN @firstoptionbank.com, and we'll address those needs as you see fit. So I see a group of people here, some of you are regulars, that's awesome. Thanks for joining us. We're okay on time today. Thanks for joining us. Invite folks, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next Friday. Have a wonderful weekend.